Hi, I'm Dillon Allen-Perez. Welcome to this video. Today I will be giving a review of the book Burmese Days by George Orwell. If you don't already know, George Orwell is the pen name of British writer Eric Blair. Writing as George Orwell, he is most famous for his later political novels, Animal Farm and the dystopian 1984. Many high school or college students growing up in an English-speaking country will likely read one or both of these later novels. I first became a fan of Orwell's writing when I read his essay, Politics and the English Language. Now I am working through his bibliography of 9 books, fiction and nonfiction. I haven't been reading them in the order of their publication, simply by which ones seem the most interesting to me at the moment. I just finished reading Burmese Days, and it is the 6th book of his that I have read so far. Burmese Days is Orwell's very first novel, published in 1934, just 1 year after his first book-length nonfiction work, Down and Out in Paris and London. Although Burmese Days is a work of fiction, it is also largely based on Orwell's real-life experience working as an Indian Imperial Police officer back when India was under the British Empire and Burma was part of India. Of course, after World War II, India became independent of the British Empire, and then Burma became independent of India. Now, the country is also called Myanmar. George Orwell's time working in the area was between the world wars in the 1920s. Burmese Days was actually first published in the United States and then later in England. It was more controversial in England because some people consider it to be critical of how the British Empire used its colonial power in other lands. According to the introduction to the Penguin Classics edition of the book, Orwell himself later wrote in a letter in 1946 saying, "I dare say it's unfair in some ways and inaccurate in some details, but much of it is simply reporting what I have seen." The story of Burmese Days mainly follows the character John Flory, who got a job in British Imperial Burma from a connection that his parents had. He wasn't very successful in school or motivated professionally, so his parents got him this job. Throughout the novel, Flory and his other British co-workers only really have some low-level clerical work to do, so they have a lot of free time and they spend most of their time drinking, gossiping, sleeping around, and hanging out at a whites-only club in the town. One of the main conflicts in the novel is a debate about whether or not they should accept the first and only non-white member to this club. Flory considers nominating his local friend, Dr. Veeraswamy, an Indian doctor, which he knows would be controversial. Other conflicts in the story include a corrupt Burmese judge who is spreading conspiratorial lies for his own gain, and a young woman, Elizabeth, moving to town. Elizabeth is the niece of one of Flory's co-workers, and he quickly becomes infatuated with her. As for my opinion of the novel, I don't really see how it's critical of the British Empire. At the same time, it doesn't seem supportive either. If anything, it seems neutral. Like Orwell said himself in that letter, he just reports things. It just shows things how they were, supposedly. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of opinion given to the reader. Some readers could read the things that happen as negative and therefore think that the book showing it is critical of these things. On the other hand, some readers could read it as not critical enough, and therefore that Orwell is being complicit in these negative things that he was a part of. An example of the book reporting the racism of the time is the whole debate about whether or not they should let a non-white member into the club. Flory is a close personal friend of Dr. Veeraswamy, but he is still apprehensive about even nominating him to be accepted into the club because he knows how adamantly opposed the other members are to even considering the idea, no matter who it is. What surprised me personally while reading the book is how often the characters refer to the native Indian and Burmese people as being black. One character in particular in the novel uses the N-word pretty frequently when referring to other characters. I was, of course, familiar with how this word was used historically in the United States when referring to African Americans, but I was not familiar with the fact that the British used it while occupying Asia. Anyways, whether the book is critical of the racism or complicit in it is up in the air. I guess there could be an interesting debate to be had there, but honestly, I don't really care about that part of the book. To me, the worst thing about Burmese Days is that it is just boring to read. By the time I got to the last page, I was surprised by how disappointed I was with the whole thing. This is the first George Orwell book that I have actively disliked. When I love a book, I usually describe it as firing on all cylinders. Like everything is done well, everything is right about it. Burmese Days seems to be misfiring on all cylinders. I know Orwell himself said he was just reporting what he saw, but he should have just written a real journalistic piece of nonfiction if he wanted it to be a report. It seems like he didn't know what kind of book he wanted Burmese Days to be. It could have been a political critique, but he stays neutral. It could have been a political thriller because there is conspiracy in it, but it gives you every character's action and it tells you the character's motivations, so there's no mystery to the conspiracy. Also, it doesn't build enough tension or lead up to enough action for it to be thrilling. So it's not a political thriller either. It could have been a romance. There's a potential romantic subplot between Florrie and Elizabeth, but I was not interested in it. It did not make me root for either of them either way. I didn't care whether they ended up together or not, which is the thing that keeps you reading a romance. And that brings me back to the potential critiques that it could have explored. For example, it is all wrapped up in not only the racism, but the hierarchies and the sexism of the time. But none of these things are explored deeply or dramatized in an interesting way. The way the story is presented doesn't make the reader feel the socio-political pressure that the characters themselves should be feeling. So, in conclusion, the most offensive thing about Burmese Days is how boring it is. As for my rating, I give this one a 2.5 out of 10. Yeah, it's bad. If you read Burmese Days and you liked it, please comment below and let me know why. Am I missing something? I said it's misfiring on all cylinders, but I do have to give it some credit for the writing style. It is easy to read and it's easy to follow the story. George Orwell is undeniably a talented writer at the sentence level. However, his talent and his storytelling for sure definitely improved after Burmese Days. Before I wrap up this review, I want to ask, should there be a movie adaptation? Ever since my brother Ryan and I have been doing our series Adaptation Station, whenever I read a book, I look to see, has there been a movie adaptation? If there hasn't, I ask myself, should there be a movie adaptation? Obviously, I did not like Burmese Days. I have given it a bad review, so I don't think they need to make a Burmese Days movie. However, if there were one person who could make a good Burmese Days adaptation that would be worth watching, it is Martin Scorsese. Scorsese has experience making movies with morally questionable protagonists and situations in general. He does a great job presenting characters, a story, and a plot, and not telling the audience how to feel about it ethically either way. For example, he directed one of my favorite movies, Taxi Driver. Scorsese also adapted some morally questionable true stories, like The Wolf of Wall Street, and even more recently, Killers of the Flower Moon. Although Burmese Days is a work of fiction, it is realism. It's certainly based on a real historical situation, and allegedly pulled a lot directly from George Orwell's real life experience. The setting of British-occupied Burma before World War II could make an interesting historical fiction, dramatic movie from Martin Scorsese. So, Martin Scorsese, if you choose to adapt Burmese Days, I would watch it. But John Flory is supposed to be in his mid-30s, so please cast a young enough actor. Leonardo DiCaprio is fantastic, but I think he's getting too old to pull off this particular role. The age difference between Flory and Elizabeth in the novel is already uncomfortable enough written down on the page. Definitely do not cast Robert De Niro as Flory. Again, he's one of the best actors out there, I know, but he is 81 years old. I'm thinking Nicholas Hoult as Flory. I liked him as Beast in the X-Men First Class generation and in The Menu. All right, that's enough talking about this book for today. Have you read Burmese Days? If you have, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Am I missing something? As always, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the next book that you read. Bye.